Hi guys, this is Easy from Easy Learning, and for today's video, I will show you how to understand the functionality of XLOOKUP. Now, before we get started, XLOOKUP is only available if you are using Microsoft 365 or Office 2021 or newer version. So if you don't have an updated version of Microsoft Office or a subscription to Microsoft 365, I would suggest you get one because aside from up-to-date features, you can also have more productivity tools which you can use for both personal and business productivity. Now, why learn how it works when you can just use it directly? Learning how XLOOKUP or any other formula's full functionality gives you more idea of its power and apply it to a variety of scenarios rather than its basic function for looking up data. And also, why XLOOKUP? Compared to VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP provides a wider range of functionality, such as placing a specified text for errors, searching from left to right, or right to left, and more. It's also named as XLOOKUP because of its ability to look both vertically and horizontally, right, left, bottom, or up. Okay, so let's get started. In order to build your first XLOOKUP formula, let's put an equal sign there, and then let's put the XLOOKUP, and then press tab. Now, the first thing that it's trying to look up for is the lookup value. It's like your criteria. So in English term, what do you want to use to locate the return value? In this case, is the employee name. Now, what we are going to use in our first exercise is the employee name A0006. So we're going to click on this cell and then lock it down by putting the comma. And then it's asking us now for the lookup array. The lookup array is the list of all your criteria all together. So in this table that we have, ask yourself, where can I find all the employee IDs from my source table? So this is the list of your criteria, which is the column A. Now, if you have a very small data set, you can just easily, highlight them and then put the F4 or press the F4 to lock it down, and you're all good. However, what if you are working with a data set that contains tens of thousands of rows? So highlighting them won't be easy. So my preference when it comes to XLOOKUP is just highlighting the entire column where I can find my criteria. So in this case, I'm highlighting the entire column A. Second one, if you can see here, is the return array. So the return array is like in English, what do I want to get in return from looking the A006 from all of the employee IDs from this table? So the answer is I want to get the employee name. So I'm going to go ahead and click also on the column B to get the employee name that I wish. We can go ahead and call that off by putting a parenthesis and then press enter. There I can see that A0006 is John Doe. Perfect. However, what if I change this? Or what if I add here a new one which has an EID or employee ID that is not included on my initial list? So if we're going to drag this down, you can see that A0007 is Evan Riley or Riley. But if I drag it even more, we get the error because A0089 is not part of my initial list. So normally, what we do in the terms of VLOOKUP is we put an if error statement. If error in the first part of your XLOOKUP, and then at the end, it's going to ask us for the error value. And in this case, let's put not found. So if we drag it down, we can see A0089 is not found because it's not part of our initial list. But the good news is XLOOKUP already has a capability of putting in the error value on its own. We don't need the if error anymore. So what we have to do is let's remove the parentheses, and then we're gonna add one more parameter to our formula. And it's saying here, if not found. For all of the information or for your information there, the bracket here symbolizes that this part of the formula is not really required to build the XLOOKUP functionality. It's just an added parameter if in case that it's necessary. So as we all know, lookups usually end up sometimes with a not found value, like our example here. So it's gonna be beneficial for us to use this XLOOKUP with the if not found, especially if we're working on a large data set. This way we can easily sort out those values with criteria that are not found. So in this case, earlier we put in the double quote and then not found, double quote, and then voila. Let's see. There you go. The not found is still there. So we can see here that XLOOKUP is more efficient than the older forms of lookups because it already has a built-in functionality that gives the functionality of the old if error. Now let's do a quick review. XLOOKUP asks first for the lookup value or the criteria. Again, in English terms, what do I want to use to look up what I want? The second one is the lookup array, where all of your criteria are found from your source table. In this case, employee ID is found in the source column A. The next one is the return array. What do I want to get out of my criteria? And that's going to be employee name from the column B. And then the last one is if not found, or it's like an error handler that if there's nothing found from from your employee ID criteria, then it will return the not found characters, or it will return not found. Now, what I'm going to teach you next is how to drag it across the board in order for you not to repeat the XLOOKUP in each column. Usually, if you are not going to drag it across the board, you will end up inputting another X lookup here, another X lookup, and another X lookup here. So we have to learn how to lock the cells. Locking the cells first requires understanding on how to locate the column and the row. So if you can see here, if I click here, it's saying I am on the cell I2. I stands for the column and 2 stands for the row. So if we just go ahead and drag it across, we are going to get results. However, if we double check, John Doe's supervisor is Robert Adams, but the site code is incorrect. Why? Because if we're going to click here on the formula bar, everything moved. Your criteria is no longer employee ID, the employee name is no longer the employee ID, and so forth. So how do I fix this? We have to lock our cells. So first things first, we don't want to move the employee ID as we have to keep it as is. So since we are moving across columns, what we have to lock here is the column part by using a dollar sign. Okay. The next one here is we also don't want to move the source for our employee IDs, which is column A. So here we can easily press F4. So it saves us the effort of putting two dollar signs in each. However, we want to move the employee name because it will move from here to here and here to here. That way, it will give us the return value of the supervisor side code and hire date of employee A0006. Let's try this out. Let's press enter. And then if we are going to drag it across the board or across all the columns, you can see that the site code is now correct. John Doe is located at site code New York 001 and was hired last January 19, 2021. There you go. So we can go ahead and drag them all together. And again, the not found. will stay as not found because again A0089 is not really found in our source column. So let's do another review. Now, doing a lock requires you to understand which part of the cell you should be locking into. So currently we only locked H, which is the column. What will happen if we also put a lock or a dollar sign in 2? Let's try to drag it down. See, it all became John Doe. Why? Because if we are going to click here and do the formula bar, the criteria did not move. It is because we have locked the cell H2, which also locks the row number 2. So that is why it's very important for you to understand which part is to lock. If we are going to lock the movements across or horizontally, then we only have to put a dollar sign on the column part, which is the H. And if we are going to do a lock that should not move vertically, then that's the time that we are going to do the row locking. There you go. So let's fix it. Okay, there we go. So let's move on to the next exercise. So in this exercise, we are going to do the hire date, or we are going to use the hire date as our unique criteria to figure out who are the employees or who's the employee that has been hired on April 16 and August 19, 2020. So let's do the old-fashioned VLOOKUP. So the VLOOKUP also requires you the lookup value. And then the table array, so it's a different one. The table array usually asks for the entire table. So we're going to lock it. And then the column index, so you have to count which column you would want to get the employee ID from. So that's column number 1. We're going to put 1. And then, right, okay, the range lookup here, usually it's default as exact match or false. So we'll just go ahead and put false or the exact match. However, it didn't work. Why? Because XLOOKUP is only designed to look from left to right. However, for the case of XLOOKUP, it has the capability of looking from left to right and from right to left. So let's go ahead and put in XLOOKUP here. We're going to use April 16. Remember, we have to lock it on the column because we want to drag it across from employee, supervisor, and site code. Now we're going to use the same data that we have here. So instead of the employee ID which we used earlier, we are going to reference our criteria on column E, which all the job hire dates are located. Again, we also have to lock this down by pressing F4. And then we want to return the employee ID, so we are going to click on column A. Here, we don't have to lock it because we want to get the employee name, supervisor, and site code later on. Let's also put in the not found value if in case that there's something it cannot find or the job hire date that it cannot find. There you go. So A001 or employee A001 was hired at April 16, 2011. There you go. So if we are going to drag this across, you can see Frank Taylor, Supervisor Maria Clara Ibarra, and New York 001 as the site code. We can go ahead and drag this down. So this is the power of XLOOKUP, and in our next video, we're going to discuss more of the functionalities of XLOOKUP by pushing more than just the if not found. We are also going to cover the match mode, and we're also going to cover the search mode. So there you have it, everyone. Now we learned what the basic of XLOOKUP and locking cells to drag columns and rows as well as looking up data from right to left. On our next video about XLOOKUP, we will cover more of its extensive functionalities which you can use to further extend what you can do with it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell icon for latest updates on our tutorials. Have fun while learning!